All right, we are now live. It is Tuesday evening. It is time for another episode of Conversations with Commodores. And I can't. I'm just so excited about this one. Down goes Bama, number one. Bama, first time in program history we've beaten a top five, much less a top one team. And I've got on my panel this evening, among others, I've got member of the 1969 team that beat Bama. Christie Hauck was a DB and had a key interception in that fourth quarter. Christie, welcome aboard this evening. I'm so glad to catch up with you again.
Same here, Bernard. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. We've got, of course, you guys know Kenny Cole. Kenny played with us in the 70s and also he's one of the rare Commodores who has a degree from both Alabama and from Vanderbilt, undergrad from Vanderbilt Law School at Bama. Kenny, welcome this evening. I'm so glad to see you as well.
Thanks, Bernard. Glad to be here, man. I tell you what, anchor down, baby. This is an exciting time.
It absolutely is. And I want to start with you, Christy. Both of you guys were at the game this past Saturday. Give us first impressions. Just share with us what it was like for you that evening.
Well, it was the greatest night or afternoon or morning ever at a Vanderbilt football game, bar none. And what was so interesting to me were the parallels to the 1969 game we played. And that just sort of wafted throughout the whole evening as Vanderbilt just played so well and executed so well. And it was so reminiscent of 55 years ago that it's kind of crazy. So it was a great night.
And where in the stadium were you? Where were your seats for the game the other night?
Well, we just got new seats in the north end zone on the tourist level, front row, right behind the goalpost. So we were as close as you could get to the action.
Excellent, excellent. And then, all right, Kenny, and I'm going to bounce back and forth from you guys. Kenny, you were at the game Saturday night with Jill. What was that like for you guys?
Well, we were a house divided because Jill's Alabama. And later in the game, it reached a point where she said, I think I'm going to stand back behind you on this walkway and just let you enjoy yourself right now. And I did. I mean, I was having a blast. And Bernard, it was amazing to be there in person and to watch a Vanderbilt football team that was so prepared and so focused and who executed everything almost flawlessly. I mean, it was amazing to watch, and it was joyful, just absolutely joyful.
Christy, we took the opening drive and drove all the way down and punctured it in for 6 from the jump. And what was that your end zone or was that the other end zone, first of all?
That was the other end zone.
I thought that it was, but that had to have, at least in the stadium, made such an impression on every crowd, regardless of who you were pulling for us to just start punching. And at least for that very first drive, Bama did not have an answer.
No, and they were thrown off guard. Obviously, like the week before, they played Georgia, and they were still on cloud nine. And I think there's a difference between Saban and the new coaching staff. I think Saban would have had them mentally prepared, maybe. I don't know. But when you play a Vanderbilt team that is flawlessly executing, like Kenny said, then it's hard to beat them, period. So
it's true that offense, Coach Beck knows his players. He knows when he was at Pittsburgh State and they won that title, they had the most prolific offense, maybe in the history of college football from a yardage standpoint. I don't have statistics. I just know little of that history. But Diego runs it flawlessly. And Kenny, there were no penalties. no sacks, no turnovers at all. I think I take that back. I think we had 3 penalties for about 25 yards. Otherwise, it was a pretty flawless game from that perspective, from a mental standpoint.
Yeah.
You don't get that against
Yeah.
Bama. You don't get that against the big schools traditionally for us.
Well, and look, I mean, every one of us has lived with Vanderbilt in our blood for a long time. I mean, I started my relationship with Vanderbilt 47 years ago when I showed up as a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, part of what has become what we got accustomed to was the fact that even if we were playing well, even if we were hanging in there with a really good team, even if we were leading a good team, there was going to be that breakdown at some point in time. And those good teams would then end up a majority of the time winning against us. And you know, I think that this particular team, look, when they went down to Atlanta and lost to Georgia State,
Mm-hmm.
they could have folded the tent
Mm-hmm.
and decided this season's good done, it's over with, and they could have given up, guys. And this team's identity, they are not quitters. They are not giving up. They decided they were going to double down and they were going to work hard and they were going to prepare and they were going to execute. And they had Missouri on the ropes. And guys, Alabama never led in the game. I mean, we started the game jumping ahead of them, and we never gave up, never gave them a lead. Always were winning that ball game from start to finish. I mean, it was impressive.
It cannot be said that Bama had a bad game. I mean, it could be said, but that's not what happened. We didn't win it by a fluke. We didn't win it at the end. We won the game and we're kneeling down in the victory formation against a team that, if you remember, we got 3 first downs on that last drive and kept them from getting the ball back. That's tremendous. Christie, I was at the Georgia State game in Atlanta. That was not the same team that we saw this past Saturday. On the Georgia State game, there wasn't as the enthusiasm wasn't there. The just the moxie and the not camaraderie, but just the cockiness, the what you need to be successful. None of that really showed through in the Georgia State game. That was clearly on TV. We could see it. I know you guys saw it on the sidelines from the stands. Just that enthusiasm that you just need. Were you able to I guess absorb any of that? Did you see that from the stands?
Yes, I mean it was unmistakable, and the team had it, but the stands had it as well, and it kind of all goes back to the first score and then the interception, which sent everybody into hysterics, and it stayed that. Everybody stood up the rest of the game because they'd never seen Alabama behind by 2 scores, and that's incomprehensible. So, yes, it generated throughout the whole stadium, and even though half the stadium was red.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you guys. Kenny, Christie, either of you guys, you being in the stadium, it looked completely full, and you can see behind me, this is the student section picture from Saturday. What was that like? Because traditionally, it's going to be way more red historically in the last many years.
You're right. The stands were completely full. I don't think there were any empty spots hardly anywhere in the entire stadium. The student section was completely full of people, and the crowd, the Vanderbilt crowd, was into that game more than any other Vanderbilt crowd I've seen in 47 years. And let me throw this out there too, Bernard, to give everybody an idea, because we mentioned earlier, Jill's an Alabama fan, and an Alabama graduate, so we go to Alabama games too, and we were in Tuscaloosa when Alabama beat Georgia. And that Alabama fan base, they are rabid, and they went nuts during that Georgia ball game. And in our stadium this past Saturday night, the Alabama fan base was the quietest I have ever heard it be, because they had nothing that got them excited and that they wanted to cheer about throughout that ball game. We jumped on them from the beginning, and we never let up, never let up. And so, the Vanderbilt fan base Saturday afternoon and Saturday evening was better than Alabama's was, just like our team was better than Alabama's was.
Guys, I want to welcome to the panel a member of the 1984 Vanderbilt team. Chuck Scott's with us this evening. Chuck, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, it's an honor. Fun time to join.
Chuck, how you doing, man? Been a while.
Yeah, been a long time. It's funny. I was telling Bernard I got called by Mad Dog to do an interview because they wanted a living member of the 1984 team, and it felt like D-Day, Normandy, where there's three guys left alive, to represent. It's kind of what it felt like, but it just means I'm really old. But that was fun. That was amazing to watch.
Chuck, we haven't dipped back into the Wayback Machine to talk about the 69 or 84 games yet. We're talking about Saturday. By chance, were you at the stadium, or did you get a chance to watch it on TV?
I watched it. I was not back in town yet. And Coach Jacobs, Mickey Jacobs, you guys probably are familiar with, had called me with a ticket even, and I wasn't going to be here in time, but I regret that now. Honestly,
I think Chuck has gone out on us. You guys, are y'all with me?
Yes. Yeah, he's frozen up.
Okay. Chuck, you're frozen. We'll get him back just a second. Until he comes back, I want to go back to you, Christie, because I do want to talk about you living in Nashville. You've been part of the Vanderbilt community since the 60s, and you've been an avid supporter of Vanderbilt athletics and the university for all these decades. I guess I want you to kind of put in perspective, if you can, a little bit. What did it mean, or what has it sunk in yet, the fact that we've won this game?
Well, it's hard to say, the long-term effect. I can say going back to 69, the recruits that were at that game, they signed immediately when we beat Alabama. One of them being D. Marco. Does that ring a bell? D played, and then he was most recently the mayor of El Paso, Texas. So D did well, but because he was at that game and we won, he came to Vanderbilt, and so did so many others. So it helps immediately. And here is the key to whether Saturday was the greatest performance we've ever seen from a Vanderbilt football team. Now, going back, you saw Georgia State, as we've alluded to, but the mark of this team is going to be how they play against Kentucky, because you're on cloud nine, and if they're a really good team and can stay settled, then they'll play well. They may not win, but if they play well and competitively, that's a good sign. So, but if they just get slaughtered, then it's sort of the same old Vanderbilt.
We don't need a Mike Tyson versus Buster Douglas situation.
No.
Kenny, it's been 72 hours. I know you're tapped into social media. I know you live in the world of Alabama, thick and thin, in Huntsville. What's been the response? What's been the reaction that you've had to deal with?
Well, having a whole lot of buddies and friends in the state of Alabama who also went to Alabama. Some of them played for Alabama. Uh, Almost all of them are Alabama fans. And because of their friendship with me, excuse me, they'll cheer for Vanderbilt whenever Vanderbilt is playing anybody other than Alabama. And a few of them I've seen where they're posting and saying things where they're being critical of Alabama and saying that they shouldn't have lost to Vanderbilt. The ones that know anything about football, however, are the ones who are saying and posting and correcting the others, when they explain, look, Vanderbilt played a really good football game. They were prepared. They had a game plan. They executed it, and they deserved that victory. And Alabama needs to go back and learn from their mistakes and get better. And, there's people that are calling for Kalen DeBoer's head. And the ones that know something about football are telling those people, look, this is not a fluke. That was a good football team that played Alabama and got that victory. And, they're telling everybody to, take a pill and relax a little bit. But every one of them that I know that said anything to me has been very, very nice. And because they know I've been waiting on this for 47 years. And they knew how, my phone blew up at the end of that ball game. I had so many text messages coming in, I couldn't even respond to everybody. So, I think that the fans that know football know that was an extremely good football game that was won by the best team on the field that day. And I agree with what Christie said, though, because look, guys, none of us on this screen, and nobody that's listening to us wants this to be a flash in the pan. And here's the difference is, guys, I think that Coach Lee and his coaching staff and the young men on this football team are of the same mindset that we are. They don't consider it a flash in the pan. And, Bernard, before we got on this call, you read a quote from Coach Lee, and I had read that as well. And the thing that struck me about it was this. After the ball game, Coach Lee said they're in there at halftime. And he told everybody just get quiet because he wanted it quiet for about 10 seconds. He wanted the emotion out of the room for just a moment. And then he explained to them, guys, you've got everything you need to go back out there in this second half and win this ball game. You don't need to do anything spectacular. You don't need to do anything special. What you need to do is go out there and play to your identity, execute the game plan, and we can win this ball game and we'll win this ball game. And that is such a huge mindset that we need. And so I'm hoping, like Christie alluded to a moment ago, that this week those young men are all doing the same kind of preparation every day. They're watching film, they're getting ready, and they will go up there to Kentucky and play the same kind of disciplined football, play to their identity. And guys, their identity, it's not what people, talk about when they say the same old Vandy.
Yeah.
I think we've turned a corner in the program right now, and this won't be a flash in the pan. And I told some of my Alabama friends earlier today, you guys need to just watch the rest of this season, because by the end of this season, y'all are going to be looking back and saying, guys, that loss to Vanderbilt actually makes us look better because Vanderbilt's such a good football team. Nobody needs to be critical of Alabama for losing that game. We just got beat by a better team that day.
Yeah, no, I agree. Chuck, I want to come to you now. Chuck, in 1984, I was a junior in high school sitting in Bryant-Denny Stadium. My entire family were Alabama grads. I was not happy with you particularly and your team that day. Little did I know 18 months later, a lot of the guys on that team would be my teammates. And here's my question for you. Can you put into perspective the 84 win and what it has meant? And maybe, and I don't know if the guys on the current team will absorb this or feel this for years to come. But what was that 84 win like for you back then and then in the last many years since?
Well, first of all, you're welcome for frustrating you that day. and and all those other Alabama fans. It's a memory. It was 40 years ago, and it's one of those memories you can remember like yesterday. There's certain events in life, and but beating Alabama in Tuscaloosa was definitely one of those for us. My grandfather was an All-American at Alabama and a 1931 Rose Bowl national champion. So I have his national championship ring. Sometimes I tell people I got a national championship ring, and they're like, "I thought you played at Vanderbilt. Were you a woman bowler? I mean, what?" And I'm like, "No." And it's my granddad's from Alabama, but he actually gave us the pregame talk, which was special for me to have my grandfather, encouraging us, wearing a Vanderbilt hat. He was a Commodore that day, and but winning at Alabama, it's just something we'll never forget. And when I was doing the interview with Mad Dog with Lance, and he said, if y'all played that game 100 times, Alabama's going to win 99 of them. And I said, I don't agree at all with you make it sound like it was a fluke that, Alabama just had the absolute worst day they could ever have, and Vanderbilt played the perfect game. And I said, I watched the game, and Vanderbilt outcoached and outplayed Alabama in every aspect. I mean, so Kenny, you were saying, the football people know that Vanderbilt won that game on the field. It wasn't luck. It wasn't, the stars aligned and Jesus is coming back. Although I did put that in my text afterwards. I said, everybody run outside. I think Jesus is coming back. But but the game itself and what Clark Lee's doing and the transfer portal, and you talk about the importance of one player in one position. I mean, it takes a team. Don't get me wrong. But Diego, I mean, you put a kid who he's smart, he can throw, he can run, and he's got that it factor of win, confidence. And I'm a believer. I'm watching his brothers going nuts, and I'm like, I want to be around that. And I think in the day and the era of the transfer portal and every game being on TV and social media, we just gained access to a lot of players that can qualify. Sir. They got to qualify. That's our disadvantage, which can be an advantage. But, if a kid can qualify and we can bring them in, I don't think we're going to have to work really hard to get some great players who are going to be now saying, hey, I want to go to Vandy. They're in the SEC. They get a Vanderbilt degree. I mean, everything about it. If we need to definitely take advantage of that opportunity and market what we have, because we have something really special.
Chuck, I think that the missing piece, because I think all the other pieces have been put in place over the last several years, was a signature win like Saturday night. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the thing that pushes us over the edge when it comes to if players or student athletes trying to decide where to go. Christie, I want to go to you, and then I'm gonna come back to you, Chuck, because I know you have limited time. You played in the '69 game with a quarterback with a lot of moxie, sophomore Watson Brown. How do you compare Watson back then with Diego now? Is there any comparison from a personality standpoint, from an athleticism, from a leadership standpoint?
Well, there's some comparisons. Watson could scramble when no other quarterback could. But what you don't know about the '69 game is that a B teamer named Denny Painter got elevated to quarterback, and on the last drive, he threw 4 passes for about 80 yards and then got down to the 10-yard line. Watson comes in and throws one short pass for a touchdown. And both those quarterbacks were named co-backs of the week in the nation. Mm-hmm. So Watson's comparison, Watson could run as well as Diego. Denny Painter could throw maybe even a little better than Diego, but nobody has the combination that Diego has.
Mm-hmm. He just has that quality. He's just such a leader. He's got such charisma, confidence. My gosh, that kid is. And I met him this summer when I was at Magoogan, and was the nicest, most polite guy. He really was. And I love that he's doing what he's doing. Chuck, let me come back to you, and then Kenny, I'll come over to you. Chuck, you caught that touchdown pass from Kurt in the '80 game, but there was still a lot of time left in the game. Y'all still had a mission to accomplish. How did Coach Mack keep the sidelines in that controlled mental environment about having confidence and not holding their breath and not just fearing that Bama was coming back that day, because you guys won by 2 scores? How did that play out on the sidelines?
Oh, the year before, my junior year, we went up 21-0 on Alabama in Nashville. And, so we just thought, got this one in the bag, and we lost. I referred to our defense as the Swiss cheese D, but that's just because a bunch of my buddies, I like to give them a hard time. But in that senior year, our defense was definitely playing better. And, I don't know. Every game, we never feel like we can rest in any game at Vandy, but that game it went our way, and our defense really did step up, make some great plays, some big plays. Christie, I loved you hearing you talk about Watson Brown. I can't picture him as a scrambling quarterback. As my offensive coordinator, for my first 2 years, where he would just like limp out onto the field. And I think, how could he have been a great scrambler? But what a great offensive mind. And I think that's what Vandy has right now. What Watson did with us when we couldn't just line up, in the Herschel Walker, Bo Jackson era of giant linebackers, run stoppers, and we come out and just spread it out, and defenses don't know what to do. They didn't have nickel packages. They were like, I remember I was, considered a tight end, and I'd flex out a little bit, and this big old, 260-pound linebacker is supposed to run with me. And I was like, nice. I mean, I wouldn't want to run into him, but I sure could run around him. And so they didn't have any, nobody had an answer for what we were doing. And that's what made, Watson so great. And we had so much fun just throwing the ball around. But that's what I think they're doing now with Tim and the offense. That scheme is, I likened it to the military academies. They line up in that the oldest offense in football, and dare you to stop them. And most teams can't. I mean, you just don't practice against that fullback getting 3 yards every time he touches the ball, and then they do their little. And but I feel like what they've got going at Vandy, it's not that. It's it's that variation. with the shotgun and all the things that come with it, and then a quarterback that can execute it perfectly. But that scheme is giving people fits. And so, my hat's off to your old teammate, Watson Brown. I love Watson. But what they're doing now at Vandy it reminds me of what Watson did with us. He gave us an advantage by creating a scheme and using our ability to think and react on the run and make reads and adjustments as we, on the fly. And we beat people because we could do that. So, and I wish I could stick around, but I do got to run here in a minute. But it is fun to see you guys, and it's fun to reminisce.
Just to reflect real quick before you get out of here, when Coach Beck dials up those little shuttle passes to Eli Stowers, number 9, coming underneath the line, and he just gashes them for 15, 20 yards. It's just brilliant play calling. It really is at the right time. And when Cam Johnson caught that touchdown at the end, oh my gosh, that was just brilliant. Just loved it.
Well, and Watson I'd love to go back. I can show you, how we can remember every play in our games. We had a shuttle pass that Watson ran, and we'd run it to everybody. But I loved it when I got my turn because it just always worked. It's the ultimate screen, and it's, just everybody up, and all of a sudden, whoop, underneath, and there's nobody left. You just get to run. And so, I loved it. I love what they're doing. I'm a believer, and Clark's got it going.
He does. I got a question from Chris Kraus for you, Chuck. I'm supposed to ask you if you remember at halftime when Coach Mack asked Monaco how he felt about Bama. Do you remember Rob's response?
Oh, it's probably something we can't repeat on the radio.
No, I'll leave it at a PG or a family friendly where he says, "I got a lot of hate fired up in me, Coach."
That's the nice version.
Yeah, right. Because I know my mom's gonna be watching this in a little while.
Yeah. Rob could get a little fired up. I was glad he was on my team.
Well, Chuck, I know you got to scoot in just a minute, so thank you for your time and popping in here and sharing some of your memories with us. And of course, you can stay as long as you want tonight. Yeah. Kenny, I want to scoot over to you and ask you, during your years of playing against Bama, I know your allegiance was to the black and gold, of course, because that's where you're lined up, and you probably had friends or other competitors from high school on the other side wearing the crimson. But here's I want to ask you, those games are heavy emotional games when we play against programs that we're used to rooting for. But you got to turn that off as an athlete. You don't care. You want to win that game. You want to win every play. Those games that you played against Bama, were they particularly memorable and stood out for you, or are they just another game on the calendar, on the schedule for that year?
Well, the one that stands out to me the most, Bernard, is the game that we played against Alabama my sophomore season. The game was actually, tell you how much I remember it. It was on September 30th, 1978. And we played Alabama in Tuscaloosa. And to understand what I'm fixing to tell you, I need to digress for just a moment. And some of the guys that are watching might know this, but my dad was a Marine during World War II. And he was what back then was called a paramarine. So he was special forces. And he was part of 600 Marines who volunteered for an unknown mission. And it was to be a diversionary attack on an island called Choiseul. And y'all are wondering, why in the world is Kenny talking about a battle on a Pacific island in World War II? But here's the thing, those 600 Marines convinced a force of about 7,000 Japanese on that island that they were the main American attack. And Japan threw all of its support into that area to try to stop our main attack, when our main attack was actually happening somewhere else. It was on the island of Bougainville. But my dad always talked about that to me, and he always said that their motto was the difficult we do immediately. The impossible takes a little longer. And in 1978, September of 1978, we go down to Tuscaloosa to play Alabama. And guys, we fought our rear ends off against them. Now, none of the teams I played on ever beat Alabama. Okay. So I can't share a victory like Christie, or like Chuck did. But we went down to Tuscaloosa, and at halftime, we had fought them knuckle and skull, and the score was 16-14. And when we went into the locker room, I was just a sophomore, but I went nuts in the locker room. I mean, their star running back was Major Ogilvy. And I had tried to kill Major Ogilvy in the last high school football game I played. And, I was trying to kill him out there on that field that day. And I went nuts in the locker room. I was screaming and hollering. I don't think that Coach Pancoast was the head coach back then. And I don't think Coach Pancoast even had any idea what to do about me at that point in time, because I was losing my mind. And we went out there for the third quarter, and in the third quarter, all of a sudden we're ahead, 21-16. I mean, I continued to go nuts. Now, we ended up in the fourth quarter with Alabama going ahead of us and winning the ball game. But I tell that story to you because, number one, that's the most memorable game for me against Alabama. And it was one where, I'd like to think that, some of those guys that were on that team were guys that, as the youngest fellas that played with me, as fifth-year seniors, they could have been involved some, in that game in 1984. Chuck was talking a while ago about Mad Dog. Mad Dog came in, behind me. He talked about Rob Monaco. Monaco came in behind me. Their quarterback in that game, as I recall, was Kurt Page. Kurt came in right as I was leaving to go to law school. I'd like to think that, maybe something that we did in that 1978 game planted some seeds that helped them then accomplish what they did in 84. I just hope that, going back to right now, what we're seeing is a sea change in Vanderbilt's program, where we're going to continue to see the same type of preparation and execution and results.
Thank you, Kenny. Christie, I've often read that Coach Bryant said that the loss in '69 was a dark day in Alabama football. I don't know if you were aware of that or knew it back then. Did you guys have any interaction with Coach Bryant post-game? Was there any of that? I don't know if he came by and said anything to the team or just anything.
Well, I heard he stuck his head in the locker room and said, congratulations. I didn't see him, but I heard that. He did call it the low point of Alabama football history. He made it a little darker than you said, but I had a little history, not with necessarily with Coach Bryant, but it's a long story. I won't get into it. But at the end, my father's best friend was the doctor for a guy named Shug Jordan. So Shug Jordan would visit the doctor's house in Lake Martin, and we would go, and then we would go right across from this house was Bear Bryant's house. And we would go to his house when Coach Bryant, he wasn't there, but they were all close friends. And so I just had this thing, mental thing about Coach Bryant, even though I had never met him. So at the end of the game, as soon as the game ended and I was on the field, I just ran right to him to shake his hand and said how proud I was of his boys. he wasn't too responsive to that.
Well,
But
at that time, were you still holding the ball that you had intercepted? Were you trying to give it back?
no, but if you'll bear with me for a moment, that's a really good story. If you don't
Yeah,
mind.
go ahead.
So in the fourth quarter, they were driving and they were up 10-7. They were on our 10-yard line or whatever, and they're going to put the game away. And Scott Hunter sprinted out to the left, and he threw back across to the right where I was covering in kind of in the middle of the goalpost in the end zone. And it was like we were playing catch. He threw the ball right to me. I was like, wait a minute. He's supposed to be the number one passer in the country. He threw me the ball. And so the whole flow was going to the left. And I look to the right and there's nothing but green grass. And so I took off and I'm going to go 90, I'm going to go 104 yards. I knew it was going to happen. And I got to about the 8-yard line and I saw a glimpse of a maroon helmet. And I planted my foot to cut across. And as soon as I planted, this guy named Alvin Samples, who was an All-American guard or tackle for Bear Bryant, he hit me and launched me airborne out of bounds into the cinder track that they used to have around the field. But I held on to the ball, and I ran back to the sidelines, and a friend of mine was standing on the sidelines, a former basketball player at Vanderbilt. He was there, and I said, hold the ball, okay, till after the game. So I gave him the ball. And then we ended up winning the game, and everything busted loose. And everybody partied until 6 a.m. Everywhere you went, people were hugging you, giving you drinks. And then I forgot all about the ball, and my friend had to leave town. 3 years ago, he calls and says, hey, I found your football 52 years later. And
You got to be kidding me.
He returned it to me. So I still
outstanding.
Yeah, I know.
Christie, that ball belongs at McGugan. That's a piece.
Well, when I die, McGugan can have it. So, but a great story that, one of those things.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Right. So.
Now coming forward to last Saturday night, we see the goalpost gets taken down by the kids, by the students. And I was listening to a podcast. Do you guys remember in 2003 when Coach Lee was on the team, Coach Bobby Johnson's team, they beat Kentucky for his first SEC win, broke a long losing streak, and the goalposts were torn down after that game. I did not remember that. Did you guys know that or remember that from 2003?
Was it
I didn't recall that.
And I can pretty much say with accuracy the goalpost in 2003 was not paraded down Broadway with a police escort and chunked into the Cumberland River. Was that not a sight Saturday night? Was that not surreal?
So it was something else. And, just Jill and I were sitting there in our seats and I told her, I said, sweetie, I just want to sit here and just watch and just soak this up for a little while. And she kept saying, you need to go down on the field. And I was like, no, I'm not going down on the field. And then the goalpost started rocking back and forth, Bernard. And she said, you really need to go onto the field for this. So we walked around. I had back surgery recently, so I can't jump over a wall. So we walked around to the gate where the band comes into the field, and there's these security guards standing there. And I said, fellas, do y'all mind if we walk out on the field too? And they said, no, sir. Threw the gate open and said, go on out there. And so we walked out onto the field. And one of the coolest things, and I want everybody that's watching to know about this, some of the players were still out there on the field. And, fans were flocking all around them and talking to them, and their parents were hugging them, and their girlfriends were trying to get a kiss from them, and all that was going on. And I probably talked to, I'm going to say 8 of them, from one spot to the other. And as I would walk up and talk to them, I would tell each one of them what my relationship to the program was. And I would tell them how excited I was for their victory. And then I would tell them, you guys have the opportunity to achieve something really, really special. So go enjoy this for 24 hours, and then let's get ready for the next victory. And almost to a man, guys, every one of those young fellows looked at me and said, "Sir, we did this for you and the other guys that have been part of this program." I mean, it was phenomenal. I mean, I don't know if Coach Lee's been emphasizing that to them, about the tradition of guys that have left their sweat and blood on that field, or if that's just the personality of the young men that make up this team. But it was almost to a man. They said, "We did this for you."
It certainly is a night that not just Vanderbilt Nation is going to remember, but frankly, we made the national news with the kids walking the goalposts. I mean, with police escort. That's just so surreal. And then the same night, comedian Nate Bargatze's hosting Saturday Night Live. And he's throwing up and he's giving them a shout out. I mean, I just think stuff like that is just so great.
Do you know they're cutting up the goalpost and you can buy a piece of it?
You can afford
most of it is already sold out. They're looking for things to sell. the pylons, I think you can get a game used, I don't know, helmet or something like that, maybe a football, but they got to capitalize at this momentum right now.
Well, Bernard, two things about the goalpost, if you don't mind. One, I kept a diary for my senior year, and I reread it prior to this, and I read that after the game, everybody ran down on the field, and they tried to tear the goalpost down in '69, but couldn't. So I don't know what that says. I don't know where the engineering students were, but anyway, they couldn't tear them down. The second thing is we have a friend who's involved with a bunch of the bars down on Broadway, and they sent out 2 messages. One, anybody carrying the goalpost down Broadway gets free beer. So all the bars opened up free beer for everybody carrying the goalpost. The second one was, watch out for the Alabama fans because they're going to be so angry. They're liable to cause a lot of trouble. So be careful. I thought that's pretty funny.
It is so funny. I expect Saturday Night Live next week or this upcoming week to have some kind of a parody about the goalposts in some kind of a skit of some sort. But I wanted to share with you guys quickly, and we just got a couple more minutes, that I played 86 to 89, and 2 of my years against Bama were very close games. The other 2 were not so close. In fact, 2 of the years were 1-score games. In 89, John Gromos was our senior quarterback. It was, you may remember this, it was a huge storm just before and during the game. John threw over 60 passes that game. The balls were like, I don't know, 15 to 20 pounds. They were so heavy, but it was a surreal kind of a game because of the weather. And you may or may not remember this, but we faked a field goal in the third quarter, and I was the holder for the extra points and field goals. And Brad Gaines was the up back on the right. I flipped it to him. There was a hole that you could have driven 2 or 3 trucks through. But do you remember, Kenny, Willie Wyatt? Big slug of a dude. He stuck that big paw out there and grabbed Brad before he could make it through there. Because I was almost like this watching Brad, and then all of a sudden Willie's big old paw stops Brad. But that was as close as we got in my 4 years that we played against them. But those were, you remember those games. You just really do.
Absolutely. look, I know we don't have much more time, but before we get off, I want to say something that I think could be important. Okay. Uh, Part of the reason I believe that Clark Lee and his staff have been able to put together the team that we have this season is because of NIL, two things, NIL and the transfer portal. And Bernard, you know, you started this Facebook group for us that we're members of now. I went and checked, and you've got 488 members of the group, according to what I read there on the title page or whatever it's called. So I want to encourage everybody that's in this group and everybody else that might watch this, but certainly everybody in our group to think about giving to NIL because look, if each one of us can skip a couple of dinners a month and instead contribute $100 a month to Vanderbilt's NIL programs, you know, it's called Anchor Impact. But if each one of the 488 people just in our group contributes $100 a month, and I was an English major, but if I did my math right, that's $48,800 per month. And if you multiply that out over a year, you know, 12 months, then our group at $100 a month each, we can contribute $585,000 to Vandy's NIL program. And I mean, that can make a difference in what that program is trying to do to get players to come to Vanderbilt. And you take that and you combine it with Bernard, I think you called it earlier this evening, a signature victory like this one. And the recruiting can just be so beneficially impacted. So I wanted to throw that out there to everybody. I think it's important for all of us. We've all gotten a lot out of being associated with Vanderbilt, having that degree from Vanderbilt, having built the relationships with Vanderbilt people that we have. You know, everybody in that group, you know, is in a position where they might be able to make a contribution. You know, some folks can do more than $100 a month. Some people may be able to do $10 a month. But if we just average $100 a month, that's almost $600,000 in a year. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there for everybody to think about.
Thank you, Kenny, for that. I'll put part of the show notes, the link to the Anchor Impact Fund website and how you can donate, and they have a Q&A on there. I can also put you in touch with Dwan Epps, who leads that organization. They are doing gangbusters, but gosh, it's with a school the size of ours, being a private school, much smaller alums living compared to state schools, we're behind. We're going to be behind until we can really make some more progress. Christie, I want to throw this to you to see your perspective. Some are saying this is the biggest win in Vanderbilt history, program history. Others are saying that this may be one of the top 10 upsets of all time in college football. Any thoughts on either of those?
Well, yeah, I would. That's a tough one. Not a tough one. In '69, when we won, they said it was in the top 5 greatest upsets of all time in any sport. Well, okay, thank you. But fast forward, I don't know that you can. I don't know of a bigger upset on a bigger platform than this one Saturday. Anytime in my memory, we've all seen tons of upsets, but on this stage, I guarantee you the last half, every TV in America that had got the SEC network was watching this game. So the exposure is worth millions, just millions if you had to go buy that. Yeah. So I think under the circumstances, it'd have to be, if you rank the top 10 biggest upsets in college football history, it would certainly fall within that. And it would kick out the 69 game.
Well, in 69, Bama was ranked 13th when you guys beat them. In 84, I'm not sure if they were ranked at that time, but in either case, they certainly were not number one like the 2014 just won.
Well, and Bernard, I'm going to say one thing about that question or that issue. Yep. I read something where Paul Feinbaum the other day said that this was the worst loss in NCAA history. That's a quote from that guy. And let me tell you what, I want this Vanderbilt team and the teams in the next few years to play so well and win so many games that when I get a chance to meet Paul Feinbaum, I can tell him to kiss my ass.
Love it. Love it. Christie Hauck from the 69 team. Kenny Cole, double degrees, one from Alabama and one from Vanderbilt, played for us in the 70s. Gentlemen, thank you for your historical perspective, for being there Saturday night, never doubting the black and gold, and always continuing. Anchor down.
Bernard. Thank you.
Anchor down, man.
You guys, we cannot let up. We got Kentucky this week. We'll see you guys later.
Okay. Somebody get ready to hit somebody.